All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are going on a pretty wild journey back in time. But we're not going to some far off land. No, we're exploring a world that's hidden right underneath the waves of the North Sea.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if a huge stretch of land, a place full of life that actually connected Great Britain to the rest of Europe, what if it all just vanished? It sounds like something straight out of fantasy, right?
Well, believe it or not, this is no fantasy. This place was real. Its name is Doggerland, and it was a massive prehistoric landscape where people lived for thousands of years before the sea swallowed it whole.
So, what did this place even look like? It's sometimes called the Mesolithic Atlantis, which is pretty cool. Let's try to paint a picture of what this lost world was really like.
Okay, so first, get that image of the cold, gray North Sea out of your head. Instead, picture a huge, sprawling landscape. And it wasn't just some boring flat plain. We're talking about a world crisscrossed by enormous rivers, dotted with lush wetlands, and covered in gentle, rolling hills. It was a totally different world than what any map shows today.
And here's what's so incredible. This place was absolutely teeming with life. It was a complete ecosystem. You had these rich woodlands, huge open grasslands for animals to graze, and wetlands just bursting with birds. And those rivers, chock full of fish. For the hunter-gatherers living there, it was like nature's supermarket, and it was always open.
And that's really the heart of the story. This wasn't some empty wilderness. This was a homeland. For thousands and thousands of years, Mesolithic people, our ancient ancestors, they lived here, they hunted here, raised families here, and built their entire lives in this place. Of course, that world is gone now. So the big question is, how on earth does a landscape the size of a country just disappear? Well, the answer is in these massive geological forces that kicked off right at the end of the last ice age. So the first part of this puzzle has a fancy name, Eustatic change, but all it really means is that the entire planet's sea level was on the rise. As the world warmed up, these gigantic ice sheets that covered huge parts of the globe started melting, pouring an unbelievable amount of water into the oceans. But at the exact same time, something else was going on, something more local, and this is called isostatic change. The easiest way to think about it is like a mattress. For thousands of years, the immense weight of all that ice was pushing down on the Earth's crust. When the ice melted, that weight was lifted, and the land itself started to slowly spring back up. So you've got these two things happening at once, right? The sea is rising, and the land is also rising. But here's the kicker, the absolute crucial part. The water was rising way, way faster than the land could rebound. It was a race against time that Doggerland was always going to lose. And what this shows us is that this wasn't some sudden, overnight biblical flood. It was a slow, creeping submergence that happened over generations. What started as a huge plain slowly became a string of islands. Imagine watching your world shrink year after year until one day, it was just gone. Now, this all sounds like an incredible story, but you might be wondering, how do we know any of this for sure? Well, let's dive into the modern science that's basically playing detective and uncovering the secrets of this sunken world. Scientists and archaeologists have found hard physical proof just sitting on the seafloor. They drill into the seabed to analyze ancient pollen, which tells them exactly what kinds of forests grew there. They use sonar to map out the river valleys that are now drowned. But the most incredible part? Fishing boats have literally dragged up mammoth bones, ancient human tools, and even the skulls of the people who called Doggerland home. For the people who lived through this, it was a slow-motion catastrophe. It forced them to completely change their way of life. They had to keep moving, find new places to hunt, and eventually they had to abandon their homeland for good as the water just kept coming. It was a climate crisis that unfolded over thousands of years. And that idea of a climate crisis brings us to the final and honestly the most important part of this whole story. Why should we care about a world that vanished thousands of years ago? Because Doggerland is sending us a powerful warning from the past. Just look at this comparison. The cause back then was natural warming. Today, it's human-driven climate change. But look at the time scale. This is the scary part. The people of Doggerland had millennia to adapt to the rising seas. We are facing a similar threat, but our timeline is measured in decades, maybe centuries. The impact for them was having to migrate. For us, it's a direct threat to the very existence of our coastal cities and island nations.
And this is exactly why Doggerland isn't just some cool historical fact. It's a real-world case study. It shows us, in no uncertain terms, what happens to coastlines, to landscapes, and to people when the sea begins to rise. It's a vital history lesson written on the bottom of the ocean. You know, the people of Doggerland had no choice. They had to retreat. Their story shows the ultimate outcome of rising seas. You lose your home. They had thousands of years to pack up and move. We have just a fraction of that time. So the real question their lost world leaves us with is, are we actually listening to its warning?